Starting a realistic Tottenham Hotspur career mode in FC25 and even carrying into FC26 offers a unique and compelling challenge. Despite a disappointing league campaign that saw Spurs finish in 17th, they ended the season on a high by winning the Europa League, breaking a 17-year drought and securing Champions League football in the process. However, the league struggles led to the departure of Ange Postecoglou, with Thomas Frank stepping in as the new manager. The summer window has already seen smart additions, and the focus now shifts to trimming the squad and reinforcing key areas to match Frank's tactical approach. Here's how you can start a realistic Tottenham Hotspur career mode in FC25. To kick off the career mode, one of the most important steps is implementing Thomas Frank's tactical ideas into the team, as this plays a key role in keeping the save realistic. At the time of this recording, there haven't been enough competitive matches to fully break down the exact tactical setup with Spurs, but I've put together a predicted tactical approach, and based on how the team was deployed in their preseason match versus Reading, it's pretty accurate. So be sure to check out that tactical video that will be linked at the end of this one, so it can be implemented straight into your career mode. And keep in mind, I'll be recreating a more refined version of Frank's tactics once I've seen more of his Spurs in action. As we take a look at the Tottenham Hotspur squad heading into the new season, it's clear that Thomas Frank will be left with some tough decisions. This summer will be all about identifying the core players to build around, and those that don't necessarily fit will definitely be offloaded. That could be with a permanent transfer or possibly even a loan to develop. Now, before I run through the entirety of the squad, there are several players that will be missing from it. Now, these are players who have either been transferred out on a permanent deal or have either left the club and been released. So we'll start off with the three goalkeepers. There is Kingsley, Vicario and Keeley, who has come back from his loan spell. And to be honest with you, I do see Spurs maybe targeting a third option with a bit more experience going forward, but otherwise both Vicario and Kingsley are two very good options as the number 1 and 2. For the left back department, there's only Destiny Udogie in the team. Now of course there's also Ben Davies that can be deployed there, but with his age it would make it quite difficult for him to consistently back up Destiny Udogie for that position. And at the time of this recording, Spurs haven't actually been linked with any proper backup options. Now Spurs have got quite a few centre backs on their first team books, 7 to be exact. There's Ben Davies, who can play in multiple areas. There's also Christian Romero, who will no longer be leaving Tottenham and going to Atletico Madrid. There were some strong rumors at the beginning of the summer and at the back end of last season, but those rumors seem to have died down, and he has seemed to have committed his long-term future to Tottenham Hotspur. There's also Kevin Danso, who I would suggest you go and sign on a permanent deal, as that is something that Spurs have done. Not to mention players like Dragushin, Van de Ven, and then of course there is also going to be Ashley Phillips, who has been linked with a permanent move away from the club. It hasn't really worked out for him during his time at Spurs. He has had a few loan spells, but I think Daniel Levy and possibly even Thomas Frank would look to shift him out the door to recoup some money to maybe invest in a better player that fits the overall tactical system. And then there is the young teenage centre-back Vuskovic, who in his first game versus Reading, of course it is just a pre-season game, but he recorded both a goal and an assist, which is absolutely amazing considering he is a centre-back. And it's got a lot of Tottenham fans very hyped for the potential of this youngster. Now I do think that he could either be loaned or maybe be a mainstay option for this Tottenham side. If he does stay at Spurs, I do think he will be getting his opportunity in the cup games, and if he does take those opportunities, he could definitely be competing with both Christian Romero and even Mickey van der Ven for possibly a starting position. Now the right back area of the team is very much sorted with two fantastic options, Pedro Porro as well as Jed Spence. Now Spence can also play on the left. Keep that in mind, he could easily be an adequate backup for the left or the right hand side. But I do think that this is an area that Thomas Frank doesn't necessarily have to address or even add to. Now if Thomas Frank does continue to use the 4-2-3-1 formation for this Tottenham Hotspur side, the base of the midfield will be very important. Now there are currently 5 options for that double pivot role. There's Bentancur, Basuma, Sarr, Craig and Gray, and of course you can also add in a player like a James Maddison to potentially play a bit deeper, or maybe even a Bergvall in that deeper position. Now Spurs have been linked with 1 or 2 defensive midfielders over the summer, which does mean that 1 or 2 of these players might find themselves out the door. Now the first player that I do think could make way could possibly be Yves Bissouma, who has had a very up and down, inconsistent time during his tenure at Spurs. So he could definitely be out the door, alongside potentially Craig, who could be either loaned out or possibly sold depending on the situation that he finds himself in. For the left midfield position, there's Mohamed Kudus, who recently moved from West Ham to Spurs in a £55 million deal, and I have already made a video, a tactical video at least, on how he might be able to fit into the team as a striker, as a 10, or maybe even as a winger. So be sure to check out that video if you're interested. Then there's Brian Hill and Manuel Solomon, both of which I have transfer listed, as I do think that they will be exiting the club in the summer. But I would also say that a player like Manuel Solomon, who hasn't really had an opportunity at Spurs, he might get a few preseason games to try and prove himself, and if the likes of Thomas Frank is impressed with him, I do see him maybe having a bit more of a future at Spurs. So there are 3 designated central midfielders in the side, the first being Abbott, who I would look to loan out in the summer, maybe get him a bit more experience and then sell him later on down the line, the second being James Maddison, as well as the third being Lucas Bergvall. Now both of these players, James Maddison and Bergvall, could definitely be converted into number 10s, but they could also be deployed slightly deeper, maybe against a side who do tend to sit in a low block. You might want a bit more technical quality on the pitch, so therefore you could look to deploy one of Bergvall or Maddison in that number 6 position alongside a holding midfielder. Now speaking of the number 10 position, I'll start off with Morgan Gibbs-White, who I have given the number 16 shirt to. Now for those of you who don't know, he hasn't officially been transferred just yet because Spurs triggered the release clause, but Nottingham Forest feel like there was some confidentiality type things that were broken in the process of it and they're trying to fight it. But I do think that in the end he will end up being a Tottenham Hotspur player, and therefore I'm not going to put him back in the Nottingham Forest side. I'm going to keep him in the Spurs side as the potential starting number 10 for Thomas Frank, or maybe even as a mainstay rotational player. Another player that could also play in this position is Dejan Kulusevski, but I think with his powerful running and ability to carry the ball over long distances, maybe Thomas Frank might favor him back on that right hand side, although he is a player that can play in multiple areas on the pitch. There's also Devine and Donnelly, who I would look to loan out potentially and maybe sell them on at a later point in the career mode. There are a few more wide players to speak of, the first being Yang Min Hayuk, who did quite well in his loan with QPR last season, and I think heading into this one, depending on how he does in the preseason under Thomas Frank, he could look to be a mainstay player for the side. As for Mikey Moore, he is still very young, and I think that he could possibly be loaned out to the Championship. There's also Son Odebear and Brennan Johnson, who will definitely be a part of the first team squad. The striker area of the team is quite bloated. There's Will Lancashire, Solanke, Richarlison, Scarlett, Tell, and of course Veliz. Now there are a few of these players who will definitely be loaned out, the first being Veliz, the second being Dane Scarlett, and then the third being Will Lancashire. Now that would leave you with Solanke, Richarlison, and then of course Matisse Tell, who I do think is probably best suited to a wing position. So effectively you would only have Richarlison and Solanke. Now Solanke was brought in last season and he didn't have the greatest of seasons, but I think that under Thomas Frank he could be even better, whereas Richarlison hasn't had a great time at Tottenham Hotspur at all. And there are a lot of rumours linking him with a move away from North London. So this would definitely be an area, although it looks very bloated, I think that this is a key area that Thomas Frank would like to address. The next part of this video focuses on setting up the youth system and the academy scouting network to lay the foundations for long-term success. Tottenham traditionally scouts in England, specifically around London, to uncover local talents, so placing a scout there is a must. Another region is the Republic of Ireland, and maybe you can find the next Robbie Keane or Chris Hughton for Tottenham Hotspur. The final scouting location is flexible, but a great option could be South Korea, given Spurs' strong fan base and the growing pool of young talented players coming through the ranks. Moving on to the transfer shortlist of players who you could possibly see wearing a Tottenham Hotspur kit come the end of the summer. Now these are players who have been linked with a move to the club in real life. Over the last couple of months, Spurs have been linked with several centre-backs. Now I have only added 4 to the list because I think that these 4, there's a lot of legs and traction to those rumours, whereas others are either too recent or there isn't enough rumours for me to want to add them to the transfer list. Now the first is Mark Guehi from Crystal Palace, the second is De Winter from Genoa, the third is Steve from Burnley, who recently got promoted, so it would be quite difficult to try and get him out of the club, and the fourth is Nathan Collins from Thomas Frank's previous club, Brentford. Now based on the rumours surrounding the centre-back position, it does lead me to believe that at some point Thomas Frank might be wanting to shift to a back 3 or a back 5 system for the Tottenham Hotspur side, because right now there's 5 decent centre-backs at the club, but you need more quality if you are going to play a back 3 type system. Now I think Mark Guehi might be quite difficult to get. Of course he would be a welcomed addition to the side, but with the links to Liverpool and possibly even staying at Crystal Palace another year, it does make it very difficult and also very expensive for Spurs to try and get this player. But with De Winter, Steve and Collins, I think they're more gettable, and therefore it could possibly be a more realistic move for Spurs to try and get them. So whilst running through the squad list, I did mention that the defensive midfield department would probably be a key area that Spurs would look to target come the summer window. Now I have added 4 players to that list, the first being Adam Wharton, who I think every club in England would love to have on their roster, but I think it would also be a very expensive move for Spurs and would most likely eat up majority of their transfer budgets. But in saying that, I do think he would add immense quality, as well as he is quite young still and would have quite a few years ahead of him at the club. The other 3 players are definitely cheaper options, the first being João Palhinha from Bayern Munich, and it hasn't really worked out for the Portuguese defensive midfielder in his time at Germany, so maybe looking for a move back to England, back to London, just not Fulham but Tottenham Hotspur, North London area, that could be a great addition to the side. And I would say that this Tottenham Hotspur team, they are lacking a lot of physicality, and that is something that he could definitely bring to the side. There is also Sano, who's coming off of a very good season with Mainz, as well as Agome, who's coming off of a very good individual season with Sevilla. So these are three options that you could choose if you don't go for the main option in Adam Wharton. Now, in my opinion, the move for Alejandro Garnacho from Manchester United to Tottenham Hotspur doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, I know in FC it says he plays as an attacking midfielder, but he's actually a winger. Naturally, he is a wide player. Spurs have got enough players for those wide positions, both down the left and the right flank. Now, unless they're looking to get rid of a few of those options that I haven't mentioned, it doesn't seem likely that this move would actually materialize. But there have been quite a few rumors over the last few days to warrant me putting him onto this list. Now, I've just said all that about Garnacho, and I've added Gisand to the list, but he would be more so as a forward option. As we mentioned, the forwards that Tottenham have currently, there's quite a few of them, but after the loans and potentially the sales, they would only result in there being Matisse Tell, who I think personally is a winger, and of course Dominic Solanke. So Gisand could be a great option off the bench, possibly as a winger in some games, maybe as a two-man frontline strike unit, or maybe even as a lone striker up front if you're looking to rotate him alongside Solanke. And then of course there's Openda, who coming off of not a great season. I mean, the entirety of RB Leipzig didn't have a good season last year, but he could possibly be bought in on a cut price fee from the German club. And then of course there's also Johan Wieser. Obviously Thomas Frank coached him at Brentford, and he does know the manager and how the system would work and how the various structural systems do work under Thomas Frank, so it does make a lot of sense. But of course, with the sale of Brian Mbeumo, I don't think Brentford would want to try and sell Johan Wieser as well, unless Spurs cough up a lot of money to try and get the striker in. So there we go, people. That is how you can start off a realistic Tottenham Hotspur career mode in FC25. I do hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you don't mind, smash that like button down below, whilst also subscribing if you are new. At this moment of recording the video, we haven't hit 20,000 subs just yet, so if you are not a part of the channel and you're not subscribed, please do consider hitting that big red subscription button and helping me get to 20,000. Of course, the main goal for this year is to try and hit 30k by the end of December, and we are on the road to that. So if you would like to be a part of that journey, please do consider hitting that big red subscription button, as well as the little like button just above it, please. That would be absolutely amazing. Now, if you are looking for extra content, please do consider joining up with the Brom Squad Gaming Patreon, where I make retro tactics, and I am going to be introducing at some point, I know I have been saying this a lot, but at some point I will be introducing other video type ideas onto that platform, maybe come FC26. So if you're interested in something like that, please do consider joining up with it. The link for it will be down below in the description, right next to the link for the Brom Squad Gaming Discord, where we chat everything IRL football, as well as FIFA and FC and 2K FIFA and all that good stuff. So yes, there is that too. Anyways, I'm done waffling. I hope you guys have a smashing goddamn day, and I'm out of here. Peace.